Welcome back to week 2 of Project OZTOG, guys. We're glad that you liked week 1 and that you joined us back for week 2. Just in case you missed us last week, just do a quick introduction. I'm Rob. This is Chris. Let's get into some topics now. And to start off, we're going to talk about smart devices and the impact they've had on photography and the role they play in your business. Chris, I'll get you to start off, mate.
Yeah, definitely. So, obviously photography has always been about, using a camera, but a lot of DSLRs, and pretty much all DSLRs, if not most of them, or, even cameras, I should say, are pretty much using some sort of smart device nowadays, whether that be, wireless image transfer, whether that be, being able to tether it remotely. There's a whole spectrum of things that you can do with your camera and with your smart device these days. And actually, for me personally, I always find that I always use it as a remote control. So I always use the app when I'm shooting, I should say. And I find that really, really handy. It does chew through my phone battery a little bit, but otherwise it's super handy. Especially for someone like myself who's doing, who does a lot of astro and long exposures, especially with light trails. It's always great just to have your camera set up on the tripod, have the phone set up to your have the camera set up connected to your app, and then you just hit shutter, and then it just takes a shot. So I personally find it really handy. But how to use it, Rob?
Well, to be honest with you, I think the smart devices really, really changed photography in general. How do I use it? How does it fit in my workflow? It fits in really the same way you mentioned. It's basically a remote control, especially on the mirrorless system. It works really, really seamlessly. I use Nikon, so the brand SnapBridge is the app that I use most of the time, and it works really, really well for image transfer and also like remote control. But beyond that, I actually think the smartphone in particular is probably the best known smart device, and that's really, really changed how we photograph. But added to that, I do family portraits and stuff like that. The fact that I can now edit on an iPad or even my iPhone through Lightroom.
Yes.
Lightroom CC, for example, is so powerful, and it's made for smart devices, right? And you can kind of edit, then hand off back to a PC if you wish. But I find I can generally shoot a session with some family portraits and stuff like that. And by the time the people are home, I've already edited 3 photos to do as like a quick sample or a sneak peek.
Is that right?
Yeah, and it's so quick. It's just a few slides on the Lightroom sliders.
Yeah,
it's a low res image, so you couldn't print it very large.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's transferred using the smart app. It's there, and basically they're seeing that straight away on social media. So by the time they get home, within half an hour or so, they have a sneak peek. It's on social media. It's great. Weddings are the same. It's really changed how quick it is to get those, not finished images, but images that have been edited, color corrected. Yeah, it just gives them a preview straight off the bat. It's really, really quick, and it's really, really easy now too.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's probably a really important point that you brought up. That Lightroom app. Even I've seen a lot of iPhone photographers or iPhone shooters rather go out and actually use that apps like that Lightroom app to actually take their images and be able to play with them a lot more than what they would have initially. Because I know when you are in the phone, standard phone camera, it can be it doesn't really give you as much sort of options as far as shutter speed and all that kind of stuff goes. And they are phone cameras are getting better, but even just using different sort of I know I used Snapseed when I was sort of before I started using Lightroom, and even now I use that when I just sort of want to tweak my images just a little bit. So I think definitely having a smart device in some way, shape, or form, it's played a massive difference in making photographers being able to produce that image faster and being able to get it to their client so that they can get up on social.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the way it's they kind of snuck into our workflows as photographers and creatives has been really amazing. If you're using an image for social media, I think probably 80% of 90% of my social media stuff, it's probably even higher than that. It's probably 98% of my social media stuff is edited on the smart device. The photos are shot on the camera, transferred across. I know they're for Instagram or something like that. I don't like Instagram filters, or I've used my own filters. chuck them in Lightroom, edit them up, bang, they're on social media straight away. If I use presets and stuff, it'd be so much easier again. It just, the
Definitely.
workflow is so efficient. And if it not been printed for only social media and just for that social media kind of workflow, so quick, so easy, and it's bang done. And there's other apps you can use now that kind of let you schedule posts as well. So it
Yeah.
even adds that power, the kind of iPad, tablet, smartphones. It just adds to that platform now. So it's really, you don't really need the laptop anymore. You don't really need the PC. If you go out on the road with a camera and an iPad, or a camera and a tablet or a smartphone, you've got a sufficient kind of arsenal at your disposal to be on socials, to do the, live chats, Facebook Live and all that stuff if you wish. It's kind of like the whole toolbox now, and you've got that at your disposal in a small bag now. So I think it's
Yeah,
pretty
100%.
amazing.
Yeah, definitely. Like I know there's even a few products and a few kind of paid apps that you can get. But like a few products, I should say, is that you basically can actually make your whole sort of image workflow on that product. So it's not quite a tablet per se, but basically means that if you go out to a wedding and shoot 3,000 images, you basically chuck your memory card in and back it up, and then keep shooting out in the field or keep shooting on your next job, whatever it is. So it means that you're not having to take even your laptop or even your tablet out and
Yeah.
transfer the images. You basically chuck it in this thing. It transfers all the images across to the portable hard drive, and also acts as a battery. So you can plug your phone in, or your camera if it charges via USB-C, and basically have an empty card and be ready for the next job.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I,
And
I, I
I think people generally forget that smart devices aren't always like phones or tablets. They can be, like your smart power banks or
100%.
yeah, there's just such a range.
Yeah, and look, I mean, for me, I've even recently seen a application for an iPad or a tablet that kind of runs a whole photo booth thing off a tablet. So before you needed a
Yeah, I've
huge
seen them
module,
actually.
yeah, and I mean it costs
Have
money
you
and
used
an
them
investment.
before?
I haven't, but I've looked into them, and kind of play a subscription, and it talks to the camera, and it's such
Yeah,
like those photo booths used to be like a decent setup. Now it's literally a tablet, and it goes on the socials, and it's so quick. It goes, waits offline or waits in the cloud for you to get the images and upload them, give them access to the gallery, wherever you want to do, and it's just there.
yeah,
It's
100%.
so seamless now. It's kind of like, it's really changed photographers' workflow. And like you said, they're not just limited to mobile phones and tablets and stuff, but that's what we kind of talk about now. I think that's kind of everyone's first thought process, is to go to that kind of, oh, it must be a phone or tablet.
Well, that's the thing, right?
Yeah, we've talked about how it fits into our workflow. We actually haven't
Yeah,
spoken about how people actually use them for solely video and photography.
yeah,
Like,
definitely. In fact,
there's
I was watching a video the other day that actually had a phone that was being used purely as an external monitor, because it actually allowed that HDMI input. And so I think that's kind of the way that it seems to be sort of shifting. Whereas, obviously, the phone makers like Samsung, Apple, even Sony are coming back and saying, hey, we've noticed a lot more people getting into photography or video or just, being content creators. We want to sort of enable them. And so obviously this guy had his phone linked up and was using it purely as a monitor for his camera, which hasn't really been heard of before, since most cameras have a HDMI connection. So this phone actually had a built-in HDMI connection that allowed him to be able to use it as a camera, as a monitor, I should say.
Yeah, that's really cool when you think about it. I know some of the Sony cameras or some of the phones do that. No, that's awesome. Dude, I mean, like, you don't have to think it like
Yeah,
drones
100%.
and stuff. Like, when
Mm,
you connect a drone, the mobile phone or tablet that you have is generally your screen, right? Is your monitor for your
yeah. Well,
drone.
that's the thing. Right?
Um,
But like the other thing as well is like, so, and again, this kind of like shows you like the range that's out there. So, obviously when you plug, if anyone knows, generally when you plug in your phone to your, to your drone, it kind of while it does charge the battery, it kind of chews through it relatively fast. Like using it. I don't know about you, but that's just my experience. But yeah, but like with these different power banks, and even we've seen with the one of the DJIs, I think it's like the most recent one might be. It actually comes with a built-in screen now, so it means you don't have to plug your phone in. You don't have to worry about all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think it's really interesting to see the way it's going.
Yeah, and that's even kind of before we even touch on things like purpose-built video cages for phones or access goes underwater housings for phones and stuff like that. Like these are moving from a device that you kind of used to use to make calls, do a bit of light internet browsing and stuff like that, and messaging, to like their camera platforms now in their own right. Like you can build onto the phone and add lights, add video tripods, microphones, external things. And, it's taking the place of your whole camera setup now. And that's all you need. The investment is, the investment's not small now. Like you're looking at, $2,000 for a decent smartphone or one of the top Samsung's iPhones or whatever it is now. So that's a hefty investment.
If you spend that on a camera, like then you get like a decent camera for that sort of cost. So
yeah, you're getting kind of that like, high kind of level camera, which is just, not professional, but that next run down with a lot of those same functions on it. So you end up with a decent camera, but people are, there's obviously a market for cages and stuff for your smart device. So people are using them, and they must be getting 100%. Decent content out of them, like quality out of them as well. Otherwise, I wouldn't be using them.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I think for me, like probably one of the only things that I don't really like use my smart device in would be probably be street photography. Like I don't use like generally when I'm shooting street photography, I only really take snaps pretty much all in camera, and then I'll look at it sort of later on. How do you what's your kind of setup for street photography?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. I was only thinking the other day and had a conversation with a photographer as well, if street photography is actually worth it anymore.
What's that?
Well, I think it just creates a massive amount of issues in some areas and aspects and the community and stuff as well. So I think my thought process around this, and the answers are kind of yes and no scenario. It can be worth it, and I think you can get some amazing scenes. However, you've also got this massive potential for conflict and flare-ups with people in the community. Like we know some people don't like having their photo taken. Where's that line between being, private, public? Where are you kind of invading someone's privacy? And you don't. So street photographers, some of them can be really creepy, I guess, and give people give all photographers a bad name. So
I've seen that a few times over the last few years, definitely.
I think end up with those, the creepy guys who kind of hang around beaches and stuff like that, or and they do it in a creepy way and stuff like that. And it's everyone, it's unfortunately a few bad eggs wreck it for everyone, I guess.
Well, that's the thing. I think like it's important to remember that not everyone is like this, and there are quite a lot of quite famous street photographers that get some amazing images, and it's really cool to see when you see those really great images. But I feel like also like I don't mind street photography because I think it kind of opens it up to everyone. Like you can literally just, if you're not sure what to shoot and you just want to get out there and flex your creative muscles, you can basically just go out, just pick up your camera and go for a walk on the street, right? And capture some relatively cool scenes.
Oh, definitely.
So but I think you definitely need to sort of establish that, being, if you're going to take a picture of someone, do it in a respectful manner, and don't, go hiding in the bushes or, go out there with, 150 to 600 mil lens or something like that.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge thing. Like I think, like I really like street photography in regards to it. Let's, like you said, lets you kind of flex your creative muscle a bit.
Yeah, definitely.
Like we've been out taking street photos together, and I remember that one time where I just couldn't see a frame no matter where I stood or what I was looking at. I just could not get a shot. Like it was kind of like, writer's block, but for photographers, right? So I really struggled that night, but eventually towards the end of it, it kind of started flowing again. So I think it's a really good exercise. But like you said, I think you just have to be mindful of your setting.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
you don't want to come across like, I woughldn't rock up to do street photography like a D5 and a 70 to 200 or something like that,
No.
or
Yeah,
300 or
yeah,
400 mil prime. It's not going to be received well. You're highly visible, and people will react to the camera rather than just go about and be natural. I think
yeah,
smaller kits now really lend themselves to that kind of natural element of photography, and that's the beauty about street photography. So
yeah,
I think it's worth it, but you really
yeah,
have to be mindful of what you're doing
yeah,
and be
definitely.
just generally be respectful.
Yeah, no, I've seen like before we were in lockdown, I definitely saw whenever I walked around in the city, right, I'd always see, a lot of people shooting on Fuji, or like the little sort of X100 cameras, or they'll be shooting, smaller APS-C cameras, like the XT series. Whether they were shooting straight or not, I'm not too sure, but I generally see a lot more people go with smaller systems, and I think it's because of this reason, because it can be nice and kind of like compact, and you're not too much in anyone's faces. Because the last thing you want to do, especially with street photography, if you're going to shoot someone in a scene, you don't want to be, like I said, come across as creepy. So I think being able to click that shot,
Yeah,
move on,
I think
that's it.
definitely being mindful of your kit size, like, and smaller and less is definitely
Mm,
more with street photography. The more inconspicuous you can be, the better your shots are going to be for a start, but
mm,
also the less intrusive you are, which
mm,
means, the idea of street is to capture what's happening without being present. And
yeah,
you kind of, if your kit is tiny and it's unnoticeable, then you really are successful at that. Where
yeah.
opposed to huge kit, huge camera, bags, everything like that, tripods and stuff like that, you're really
Yeah.
not low key, and people are going to change their behavior because the camera is there.
Yeah. Well, I think like the problem is that when you go for a smaller camera, you're generally looking at smaller sensor size, right? So,
Yeah,
and I think that's kind of, the trade-off is that, if you are going for those smaller, more inconspicuous kits, is that you sort of, generally speaking, trading up that, full frame sensor, or, full frame, capability. Um, what are your thoughts there, going with, a different sensor size versus, what, because you said that you didn't want a full frame big camera, what would you like, what are your thoughts there?
yeah. So again, I'm kind of gonna sit on the fence, to be honest with you, mate. I really think sensor size in 2021 probably isn't as important as it once was.
Yeah,
Um, I think the gap is getting smaller, smaller, smaller every set of new camera generation.
what do you mean by
Um,
that?
well, I think the way they perform. So, like, in regards to low light performance, it used to be full frame was really the place where you wanted to be.
Yeah,
If you're a serious photographer, you had to be full frame, full frame lenses, full frame bodies. It was the best in low light and stuff like that. Then the next one down was DX. And then you had kind of like your micro four thirds, you had your 1 inch sensors, compact size cameras and stuff like that. So your mobile phone might be 100 megapixels, but, the size of the sensors, fits on like, the tip of your little pinky. Do you know what I mean? And
yeah,
that's
I
where
think
you
that's the
kind
one
of,
thing that sort of everyone always kind of forgets, like, especially newer kind of entry level. You see phones who are like saying that, 100 megapixel sensor, and you're like, well, how big is that sensor? Because you have 1,000 megapixels in a sensor, and your sensor's still this big. It
well,
kind
that's
of doesn't
it.
really make any sense.
I mean, you got to think about it. Like, if your sensor's tiny and the next one's this big, the one that's this big is going to be better at capturing light and stuff like that. It might have less pixels and they're spread out across a bigger sensor, but that's going to perform a bit better in low light than what your tiny little one is with 100 megapixels or something like that. So, yeah,
But
it's
we
not
were
as
just we
important.
were just talking about street photography. How do you sort of how do you like, is it a compromise, do you think, when you're shooting, out there in those conditions, shooting on a smaller sensor? Like if you go out there and you're shooting at night, for example,
Mhm.
and you're shooting street photography, how are you going to be able to get those same sort of shots that you would be with a full frame, for example?
Well, I think it's not, I think it's twofold. I think it's really knowing the different characteristics of each sensor. So, and knowing knowing the limitation of your equipment, for example. So
Yeah.
yeah, you might have Micro Four Third gear, and I love Micro Four Third gear. I think it's fantastic. I think they perform really, really well for what you get and the size of the kits. So, for wildlife and stuff like that, I thought they were fantastic because your 400mm lens is now like an 800mm lens. So the reach
Yeah.
is so, so impressive. But for street photography, in backlight situations, my God, they were almost unusable
Yeah.
at
'Cause I remember
times.
that. Like I still have my Micro Four Thirds that I was always shooting on,
Mhm.
and I probably will still use it, to be honest. But I just found that when I was shooting my vlogs, for example, I did a lot of shooting at night. It just, compared to the full frame, like the low light was just nothing. Like I'd put up to 128,000 ISO, and
Yeah.
it would be pitch black.
Yeah. I
Like,
mean,
and
that,
especially for video, like photos you can kind of get away with because you can kind of push it, but
yeah.
video, when you're shooting standard video, and again, it wasn't a top end of the, like a top line of the camera. It's just, I just found that it would always be really underexposed.
Well, I mean, that kind of like comes down to, like you mentioned, you connecting it back to street photography, right? And sensor size.
Mm,
So I think, sometimes the trade-off is, yeah, I can get a smaller kit. It's not as good in low light, but that kind of lends itself to
mm.
that grungy feel that some people really like with street. Like
Yeah,
street
that's
isn't
true.
meant to be super clean, right? So you might be able to get away. The trade-off might be smaller kit, smaller sensor, not as good low light performance, but that lends itself to that look you really, really want.
Yeah,
If we can't all walk around with Fuji GFXs, do you know what I mean? That
very
medium
true.
format,
Yeah.
huge format, camera and
Mm,
lenses in a street, it just doesn't. It's not realistic.
yeah.
Yeah. So look, is it important? It is, but I think what's more important is customizing your kit to its
Yeah.
purpose nowadays. So
Yeah.
you only have to look at what Sony's done with full frame and what Nikon and Canon are doing with their Zs and EOS systems now. The kits are tiny. Like you look at it like
Mm,
a Z50 kit, which is a DX camera, and a
mm.
kit lens, or a Z5, which is full frame with its 24 to 50 mil. But they're
Yeah.
very small kits.
Yeah.
Um, do you know what I mean? And they're very usable in low light now. So that gap
Mm,
between
yeah.
DX and full frame in low light is no longer there. Well,
Yeah.
overly, it's the gap is very small now. And same with what Fuji
Yeah.
do, they get full frame performance out of a crop sensor. That's
Well, I think
amazing.
that's a good thing, is that, like, obviously everyone's going for a smaller form factor. I think it's really great to see, different companies pushing what that means for them. Like, even even Sony, they're probably one of the smallest full frames on the market.
Yeah.
And, that's always up for competition, which is always great to see. But just being able to fit what they do in those small bodies, like, it blows my mind. I just think
Yeah.
of, like, how many hours of you know people discussing things and engineering goes into those sort of setups, whether it be Sony, whether it be Nikon, whether it be Canon. Regardless, it's always really interesting to see what is
Yeah.
next for them.
Well, I think that kind of like, that's the gap. The gap in sensor size is becoming smaller because they are pushing those limits now. So,
Yeah.
before there was a distinct difference in size between your DX full frame Micro Four Thirds, for example, on the shelf. And definitely
Yeah.
when you walk into a camera shop, you used to see them like the Micro Four Thirds were tiny compared to a full frame. That's
Yeah,
in a
that's true.
DX, but that's not necessarily true anymore. Look at some of the lenses Fuji are producing, Sony are producing now, and
Mm.
they're every bit as small as some of those Micro Four Thirds kits, right?
Yeah.
And maybe
Well, close
even
to.
well, yeah, even the Micro Four Thirds kits, when you add 2.8s and 1.8s and stuff like
Yeah,
that,
that's true.
those
Yeah.
lens sizes go up.
Yeah.
So I think it's still important, but it's a yes and no type of answer. So unfortunately, I'll
Yeah.
probably get splinters again, but I am going to sit on the fence again.
Yeah.
What
I
do you?
think I think for I think for me, it really comes down to how do you plan to use it, because so many people, I feel that so many people just looking at forums and Facebook groups and that kind of place. A lot of people are always saying, oh, this camera is perfect for me. And that's great. I'm all for it. If it's perfect for you, great. I'm pleased that you have the perfect camera. But at the end of the day, it's not going to be for everyone. And if you're shooting, if you're always on the run and you're always shooting whatever it is you're shooting, it comes down to, are you using it for, like, what is it that you're using it for? And if you want something that's light and easy to use, either APS-C or Micro Four Thirds could work better for you. If you're climbing up rocks and you're shooting down from places like that, then maybe Micro Four Thirds would be better for you. Whereas if you're shooting very low light, then Micro Four Thirds probably isn't going to be good for you. You're probably better off going full frame.
I think it comes down to, like, there used to be this train of thought, like, as you progress with your career, to be a professional, you really had to have full frame. That is just not the case now. People can nail, like, if you're a wedding photographer and you prefer DX, fantastic. And there's some really good DX systems out there that really loan themselves to that.
100%.
Micro Four Thirds.
I was literally watching this person talk about how they shoot food photography the other day. And, I was expecting her to do this whole 10, 20 grand setup for the images that she was producing. Yep. Then she was literally just using like a Nikon D7100. Yep. This wasn't even that long ago that she was talking about this. And I was like, well, that's great. That's not even that high, that's like a mid-range camera. And she's getting these awesome results with that camera. So, for someone like her, having a full frame wouldn't be worth it.
No, it's really knowing your gear and knowing, seeing the image 100%. You want to produce, and the gear is secondary to that. 100%. Especially for some stuff where, talking about flat lays and stuff like that, you're really talking about, well, you can have full frame setup. Well, if you don't know your setup though, and you don't know the art to catch those images, the camera is secondary. The camera's not going to make a difference. It's not going to pull you out of that line to be a great flat lay photographer.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is that she was literally saying that, when she bought the camera initially, she really wanted to learn all the sort of ins and outs. But then she just chucked on auto.
Yeah, and
hey, if it works for you and you get great shots, it works for you.
That's what's really important. Finding what works for you, I think.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's like going, well, people, you have to have full frame to be a professional. That's not true. Micro Four Thirds, great for wildlife photography, great for streaks that's so inconspicuous. DX, they're great for everything. It's just finding what kit feels good for you. Like, if you're a street photographer, I would think that something like even those prime, the prime compacts, like the Fuji F1 or X100V or whatever it is, they're fantastic cameras for that. You've got a fixed camera on a lens. And again, I think that adds to the creativity of it. Like, one of my favorite exercises to do was to put a 50mm on my old D700 body and see what I can get with that walking around the city for a day.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That's the old body. It's probably almost 15, 20, or maybe 20 years old, but it'd be pushing 15. And it's a tank, but it's such a fun exercise to do still.
Well, that's the thing. Like, it just makes you really think outside the box, doesn't it? If you know what your gear is capable of, then you should be able to nail the shot with whatever it is you're carrying with you, whether that be your compact, your smartphone, even if you have a film camera, you should be able to nail that shot because you are familiar with what your gear is capable of.
So we're not really answering these questions, though, eh? So I mean, we've sat on the fence for the last two. I feel. I think sensor size, it's important, but not as important as it once was.
Yeah, I agree.
Street photography, is it worth it in 2021? Yeah, it is. But, depending how you shoot it and where you're at with how you shoot it and what you do. So, we're sat on the fence.
I think it's still worth it in 2021.
I think it is. I think it is.
As long as you're being safe.
Yeah, look, it depends what your purpose is, I think. So I agree, it is worth it. So we've jumped off the fence there. We've stayed on the fence about sensor size. Following on from sensor size and kits and stuff like that, and saying that kind of vibe of street photography. What about primes versus zooms? So this is something that I describe myself as a prime shooter who always shoots on zooms. I love the idea about shooting primes. There's something just I don't know. To me, it's just pure. Like,
Yeah.
shooting with primes, 24s, 35s, 50s, 85s, 105s, 200s if you can. Those lenses to me feel really, really pure. However,
Mm.
I generally shoot on the 70 to 200 and 24 to 70 when I do my events, weddings, and portraits and stuff like that. Why? They're
Yeah.
just so versatile. And at 2.8 for me, the image quality is still awesome. Just add that flexibility. That 1.8, yeah, 1.8, 1.4, 1.2s, they are great for like the bridal portraits and stuff like that.
That's fair.
But beyond that, they're really the focus is so thin. 2.8 is not much different, and you're still going to capture really, really lovely bokeh and amazing
Yeah.
photos. So to me, as much as I want to say I'm a prime shooter, I probably am the opposite.
Yeah.
But I won't admit to it because I love the primes, and
You're
I
a
need more.
closet zoom.
I need more primes. Yeah. Give me primes.
Look, for me, it's I'm 100% zoom. I've tried shooting with primes, and it just frustrates the hell out of me. I think there's a time and place for primes, definitely, but I think just zooms are just so more versatile. If you have something with a fast zoom, like a fast aperture on a zoom, like a 2.8, for example, then man, sorted. Like especially for video,
Yeah.
I think just zooms is where it's at.
I remember when I first started. There was I can't remember where it came from, who said it, but it was saying about primes. He goes, "You still have zoom. You just got to zoom with your legs." To me, it's always stuck with me.
Yeah.
But I tend to agree. If you go zooms, now I'm not so stuck on 2.8 because I think some of the f4 stuff is really, really, really nice quality.
Mm.
And it comes down to knowing your kit for what you're shooting. So if you're a landscape photographer, you don't necessarily need 2.8 to capture really high quality images. F4 is so good. Some of those F4s, like I think one of my favorite lenses of all time is the 7200 F4 by Nikon. That lens is just undervalued. No one ever thinks of it because it's a F4, and they kind of push past it. But geez, that's such a beautiful lens. Even the 24 to 70 F4 on the Z is just amazing.
I know you can get some good results out of the F4s, but I think just like being able to like shoot at like having that range and again like having that versatility, like I said previously, I think that just to me that just completes it. And like especially when you want to get that like really nice shallow depth of field, like F4 still gives you good enough results. I'll admit that, but just being able to get that like that creamy background,
I think if you're shooting people, you need that 2.8. Hey, it's just definitely. Like you said, the bokeh is spot on. But they're still amazing lenses, and like primes, I love them so much, and I'd love to use them every opportunity I have. But the 70 to 200, 2.8, 24 to 70, 2.8, bang, they're your workhorse lenses. Add the 14 to 24. That's really a trilogy lens, and each system now has some sort of combination of those. Even Micro Four Thirds have them.
Right.
So they're just amazing. And even that is getting to a level now where you have some zooms which are 1.8 now.
But even seeing a lot more manufacturers and especially third-party manufacturers to an extent coming out with something that covers all of like a bit of everything. Like Tamron do the 18 to 400. I know it's not a new lens per se, but Tamron do the 18 to 400, which covers everything from your wide angle 18 all the way through to 400, which is like fully zoomed in. It is I think it's like a 3.5 to 5.6 or 6.3 off the top of my head, but still like something, and it's an APS-C lens, but still something in that kind of range. Like you're basically swapping that out for the 70 to 200. You're swapping it out for your 70 to 300. I think it's really cool to see where these different companies are going.
Those kind of those ultra zoom lenses, which cover such a huge range, they kind of clip on and forget, right? Like if you go on holidays, You don't need to take your pro gear for anymore. You can
Exactly.
just clip one of these on and you're set. I mean, if you want to go do landscapes, you can do it. You can do beautiful architecture photos, some portraits and stuff like that. Happy snaps. They're just so versatile now. They lend themselves to so many different areas of photography. It's
definitely
mind blowing. But I think how it reduces your kit size is huge. But also for mum and dad photographer who just want to take great photos on their family holidays, those kind of lenses are just so invaluable. Yeah, because you don't have to spend 10 grand on having a whole bunch of lenses. You just whack in on an 80 and the 400, and little Johnny plays soccer on the weekend, takes little Johnny's photos. You want to go overseas and take great photos of landscapes and stuff.
Don't have to worry about taking multiple lenses.
Done. You got the setup right there. Yeah. So you kind of save yourself a whole lot of headaches with having to swap lenses and stuff as well.
Definitely.
I guess really zooms do have that advantage, like you said, considering their versatility. Primes, I think, for image quality, man, you still can't beat them. Hey, like, I mean, you whack a 1.4,
especially like your one. I was going to say like your 1.4s. Like you're never going to get that in a zoom, right?
No,
like a zoom 1.4 is going to be like this big.
Yeah, that milky smoothness is just amazing. Like 200 f2s, no matter what brand it is, Nikon, Canon. If someone shoots a portrait with a 200 f2, man, you can always tell that milky bokeh, amazing, absolutely stunning.
Good, right?
Yeah,
100%.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of another episode of Project OZTOG. Just to recap some stuff, we got some answers, I guess.
Most answers.
Yeah, we got most of them. Like, smart devices, now a necessity for your workflow. Yeah, street photography. Yeah, it's worth it.
Yeah, I think so.
Sensor size, it does and doesn't. And primes and zooms, image quality, go primes. But everything else, versatility, it's all about the zoom. All right, guys, thanks a lot. Look, hit us up in the comment section. Give us a thumbs up, add some comments, get involved. The channel will only really work if people give us feedback and kind of ask us more questions and continue the conversation. Just because we finished the topic tonight doesn't mean we won't come back and revisit it. So if you have thoughts about primes and zooms and stuff, hit us up, give us your opinion. If you think Instagram's dead in the water now, it's changed to a video sharing versus image sharing, let us know that on the previous video or even in these comments, and we can come back and revisit those topics. That's not all closed off. Have a good one, guys. We'll catch you next time. And we're always looking for a third, remember? So there's room on this panel for 3, not just a 2. All right, but we'll see you in next week for week 3 of Project OZTOG. Have a good week, guys. Catch you soon.
See ya.